Hi, everyone, and welcome to Over the Rainbow Show with your host, Bob Brown, on Friday, the 4th of October at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time, and 8 p.m. UK time. And to all the listeners from around the world, you can go to Beacon of Light Radio chat on Facebook, or you can Skype me at Beacon of Light Radio. Well, I've had a fabulous week this week. I've been to Benton a few times, seen strange things up there. We keep going up. It's a very interesting place. Well, at the moment, it's one of the best places around the world at the moment for interaction and lots of different things up there. And it's worth a look sometime for anybody out there who wants to find a lot of different things what's going off up there. I can't tell you too much, but it's really, really good. Well, I've got a special guest this evening. I think it's about a year ago since he was on. His name is Tony Topping. Tony is one of the UK's most recognised TV, radio guests, UFO journalist and contact experiencer. Can we please welcome Tony to the show? Hello, Tony.
Hello, Bob. I'm going to interview you now, pal. Tell the listeners where Bempton is. I don't know whether they know. Would they know where Bempton is?
It's in East Yorkshire.
It's in East Yorkshire.
Yeah. It's in East
and
Yorkshire.
a high level of UFO activity. That's correct, isn't it? Am I right?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots.
Paul Sinclair.
Yeah, Paul Sinclair. Yeah.
Fine man, Bob. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I remember. Anyway, enough about that. But good evening to you, mate.
How did you get into UFOs then, Tony?
Well, I mean, how did I get into UFOs? I suppose, Bob, it's because of my childhood experiences, which dominated my life at age 2 years of age, and continued to dominate my life into adult years. But really, I suppose, on and off, nothing really happened until about 1992, where I had one of these UFOs that looked like something out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind coming in over the house for a split second. Actually, it was approximately 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then it went. And it was very bizarre. And that's equally as bizarre. Well, it's not bizarre, actually, but that's equal to the incident that recently happened over the Marine Lake in Southport, where we had one of these UFOs coming in with 3 pink lights on them for about 5 seconds. Triangle-type craft, disappeared again. So that they kind of they like to just briefly appear for about 10 seconds and be on the way. Just have a quick ganders and on the way again. But we'll go to that, I think, further in the story, Bob. But I got into it really because I was having strange goings on, and I started reading UFO magazine, and I moved to London, and I started having strange goings on there. My first UFO incident was technically at Selby, but technically, I suppose, when it really all started to go bang was in Paddington in London, where I saw my first UFO fly across in front of me. I wondered what the hell it was. And then the saga went on from there, Bob, really, the unmarked helicopters, the strange Dr. Strangelove stuff that comes with it, the UFOs coming in, going out, displaying communication traits, displaying advanced scientific traits, attempts at communication, people presenting to me as secret agents and all the saga that goes with it.
Because you've had lots of things happen in them early years being followed, and people don't realise that, do they?
No, that's right. They're being followed, and I'm also writing a book at the moment called A Cosmic Secret. And my early psychic visions that I couldn't understand at the time, which were in '97, which were kind of maritime related, have a great bearing on the current situation as we see it. They never do anything by these people in the UFOs, never do anything by chance. It's always done. What appears to be an event in 1 year is actually connected to an event in another year, because time as we know it does not exist with them, really, in a technical kind of way. Intervention has occurred with the UFOs on numbers of occasions, Bob. You wouldn't believe it. You just wouldn't believe the times they've intervened to save my bacon. Oh my gracious! But that's another.
You think that's a good thing, really?
Oh yes, mate. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, what happened if we go back to the narrative? Kind of like I moved back from London. After leaving stage school, the UFOs thing still truck on. I managed to. Strange things started to happen with the UFOs coming in over the house. I mean, I remember dreaming about one UFO that illuminated a TV antenna, and that will remain constantly with me for the rest of my life. The image is there. Jason Gleaves, who's a member of my team. When you think about it now, Bob, I've got a team of people working with me, from a business advisor to an image analysis to somebody who's PR. I've now got a team working with me. I have to have a team working with me now.
Ain't that brilliant?
Yeah.
I know I was going to mention something, but what did your mum think about it all at that time?
My mother, at the time, Bob, she believed in me totally, did my mother, bless her dear heart. And what the listeners probably don't realise is that my mother, I went through a period where, you see, I'm known as a targeted individual. And that means that I'll call myself a covert witness. In the 1950s and the 1960s, there were people wandering around called contactees. They were like George Adamski, Howard Messenger, a few others, all claimed contact with aliens. So to put me in that bracket, I'm now probably one of these modern-day contactees, Billy Meyer to name but a few. However, there's a tipping point with it where the term contactee becomes the term covert witness. So I think that to coin the modern phrase, Bob, you go from contactee back then, now it's covert witness. You are a witness to events that are surrounding our society that nobody dare talk about, but are actually happening. You've got all this circus going on between Russia and America and China, all these nuclear weapons, all this kind of threat of war and chaos. Behind the scenes, however, you've got UFOs that are very real, and you've got this kind of interaction going on behind the scenes that society does not see. And a covert witness will be somebody who's had contact with UFOs, but is then mysteriously followed and stalked by forces that they do not understand. And that changes somewhat. In the 1950s and 60s, they were contactees, but I think now we could safely coin my phrase covert witness, whereby you are followed, you are watched, you do have UFOs coming in. The UFOs are from other places. The UFOs are from the oceans. There is a whole society out there, a whole tribe of star nations out there. We're not alone. We're being lied to. It's quite intentional. The lie's a very big one. The lie's a disgusting one. And as I've so often said, Bob, British listeners would appreciate this one. I've said this in public. The American listeners might not know of Arthur Daly and the used cars and Minder. There was that character, wasn't there, played by George Cole?
Yes.
Arthur Daly, Well, Arthur Daly turns up on some government store set and says, you can have this UFO free of charge. No, one user, one careful owner, you can use it, just don't look at what we do. And that's really the UFO cover-up in a nutshell. That's where it's all gone wrong, actually, Bob, in very simple terms,
There must be times when you've been threatened. And, how do you cope with that?
You don't, Bob, actually. You don't cope with it. There are times when, yes, you have been threatened. There are times when those who have done the threatening have been threatened. And that's very complex. And it's kind of like not in my remit to discuss that with the listeners because it's very complex. But basically, you have, we were doing, just recently, I gave a talk up in Wales, Bob, to a group of about 25 great people. And they all wanted me to do a Skywatch with them. Well, I heard rumour that certain researchers out there, when they do a Skywatch, anybody who takes any footage, it's claimed as theirs. The copyright is theirs. Well, you can't go doing that with people. You've got to, the key to all this, Bob, is not to embellish, not to lie, and be decent to all you meet. And you can't go wrong with that.
Correct.
So correct. Yep. So we're up in Wales there, and we're going to do Jason was with me. Going to do a Skywatch, and we're waiting for them. And I did this kind of prayer meditation, a very sacred thing where we needed to contact the. I'll go into artificial intelligence, I think, Bob. We'll talk about that.
Right.
And but I'll just stick to the narrative of this Skywatch. Wales, Skywatch, and then all of a sudden, the UFOs start to turn up. And it was very interesting because we're watching these two UFOs that are going backwards and forwards, and they're little dots of light. And Jason comments to me, they're not lighting up. They're not illuminating themselves. They're keeping at a height. They're not coming near us. They're keeping at a distance. They're being elusive. They're not really engaging with us. What possibly, Bob, could they be doing? And I remember I'd had this kind of very strange, mysterious message saying that round about 11 p.m. there'd be a flash in the sky. And sure enough, at 11 p.m. there was 2 flashes in the sky to indicate their presence. And these 2 UFOs that were keeping their distance and keeping height were still doing so. And then they went on their way. And what you've got going on there, Bob, is you've got like a UFO Cold War. So what you've got is those 2 UFOs that were keeping their distance, keeping their height, were trying to observe what we were trying to observe. They were on a Skywatch as well, because they're another group. They're Russia. And what I saw was perhaps NATO flashing in the sky at me. What you've technically got is an alien Cold War going on behind the scenes. And this is and in the US media at the moment, you've got this narrative of the threat. UFOs are a threat. UFOs are this. UFOs are that. But what you've got going on also behind the scenes is like an information civil war, whereby opposing forces within government, one element who knows and one element that does not, are in conflict with each other, you see, Bob. So you've got like this information war going on at the moment regarding the UFO phenomena. You know, as I've repeatedly said, for example, such is the lockdown and all this, that you would have thought that the head of, let's say, MI5, our top spy, you would have thought he'd be able to pick up the phone and go, listen, I need to know about the UFO phenomena. Can you tell me this? Can you tell me that? Nobody will tell him anything. I mean, Admiral Norton, he was shut out, wasn't he? Admiral Hill Norton. Listeners might not know him, but he was head of our Navy, head of NATO at one point. He was Secretary General of NATO at one point. And he publicly said on camera he tried to investigate this and he was shut out. He wasn't told anything. And there are consequences to that, Bob, of ethics and secrecy and unacknowledged special access projects, and the ethics stink. They stink. It's corrupt.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes,
why
it
they
is.
keep doing it? There's more sightings now than there's ever been.
Yes, this is right. And if you're a covert witness with all this, you'll get targeted. So if you have contact with UFOs and the people behind the UFO phenomena, you'll get targeted. And you'll get targeted by mind-invasive technology. You'll certainly get targeted by what I can only describe as a Dr. Strangelove goon squad that are out there doing it, little knowing of the great big sackload or the great big pile of manure that can be dropped on them from a great height by these people in the UFOs who are more advanced, a lot more smarter, and are kind of like part of a Star Nation collective, and they're observing everything that has gone on. And on a couple of occasions, Bob, which we can go into if you wish, they've saved my life on 3 occasions. They've saved thousands of lives at one point on something that happened, which I can't really, some of it I can't talk about, Bob, for my own safety. There's just some of it that you just got to be careful with, you know,
Yes.
for your own sanity and your own safety. And you don't want to be shocking people, I feel. You've got to be very responsible with the management of information in all this. You know, so there you go. I don't know if you've got any other questions. I'm talking away here. Have you got any questions? Would you
No,
like to...
it's fine at the
Good.
moment. Yeah. I'd like to know about being abducted.
Abducted, right? Well, in terms of abduction, I haven't been abducted. Well, I've probably been abducted on multiple times, but I wouldn't call it abduction with me. I'd call it interaction with them. Constant interaction with them via something known as non-locality and consciousness. If you hear Dr. Stephen Greer, he will talk about the fact that there is non-locality and consciousness. And if you look at the Indian Vedic text, you know, Bob, everybody goes on about America and their big situation that they face with the UFO phenomena, and they talk about the MJ-12, but India, you know, with its UFO situation, its own MJ-12, its own knowledge, or they are a powerhouse. India and UFOs are forced to be reckoned with. They know. They fully know because they had all the ancient texts. You know that in India, they invented the aeroplane. The Americans didn't, the Wright brothers didn't invent the aeroplane, the Indians did. In India, they invented the Vyama in India. They were the first things to fly. And not only that, the Indian Air Force did a highly classified project, a back-engineered project, to see if these Vyamas, Bob, could be utilized again. Do you know in some of the Sanskrit ancient texts of India, I find India fascinating. There is terms that are used. Now, I can't remember verbatim, but for example, in these flying Vyamas, there is terms for radar systems terms for kind of chemical weaponry, terms for communication. There's even one Sanskrit term for the ability, it's like a giant hearing aid, the ability for them to hear the other pilot in the other Vyama, the enemy pilot. And what you've got is kind of like this Mercury engine system, because Mercury at speed provides lift and so on. The Germans tried to pull it off but didn't. And you've got that. So in India in about 1900, they'd invented a flying machine. Tragically, it crashed to the ground. But the Indian Air Force, they reviewed all this. They looked at it all to try and back engineer one of these aircraft. So India's Air Force and under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she said in public that they would review all the UFO stuff, all the ancient text, to come out with solutions and answers. So they've got quite a back-engineered kind of carry-on going on. And up in Ladakh, Bob, in India, it's a no-go area for the Air Force, for China and India. You know, interesting.
Oh, yeah, but they're on about going to the moon, weren't they?
Well, yes, they were. I mean, India, very powerful nation, and the thing with that is that it is rumored. Well, I know for a fact that the Nordics, the blonde, blue-eyed ETs, have bases in that area. I'm sure that they do, or somebody does somewhere. And I know there's a rather funny story that I read of a guy who owns a garage in Ladakh. If I ever do a TV program, I'm determined to go to Ladakh and find the garage. The rumor was, I'm reading this in the Indian press, by the way, because I read a lot about the UFO stuff over there. Guy who owns a garage, he claims as a witness that his old TV set had not worked for years. The bloody thing comes on, and there, he says, in front of it is this non-human looking woman speaking in Urdu, saying more or less, we're people from wherever, we're in UFOs or we're in our craft, just ignore us and carry on regardless. Thank you. Over and out, and off she went. And there's these stories. Yeah, honestly, there's these hysterically funny stories of routine liaison with aliens in Peru and in India, down the road in India kind of thing, where they're just routinely liaising with them. And it was kind of like a don't mind us, we're here kind of thing. And the Indian Air Force daren't go into that area. India has its own Area 51, Bob. What's it called now? Oh, gracious me. I can't remember off the top of my head, mate, but they do have their own Area 51, the equivalent to America. And it's surprising with India how much they listen. Do you know they've probably got a bigger listening apparatus for spy communications than British intelligence? India, they're serious dudes. They have. Their intelligence apparatus is quite big, and it comes under something called RAW. So when they did all the psychic stuff as well, it comes under something called Research and Analysis Wing, where they do all the remote viewing. And it's interesting, Bob. I'm talking away here, but it is interesting to note that.
Oh, well, it is, yeah.
Yeah,
I find it very interesting about India and what they're doing.
Oh yeah. Well, you see, while we're all trucking along with SETI and radio telescopes, the Vedic texts and the Rigvedic texts of India talk of communication in non-locality with other beings, which is where it's at. Everything that goes on with the UFO phenomena takes place in subconscious non-locality. Communications with UFOs take place, and the occupants of them take place in that environment. It's the similar environment to remote viewing, Bob. For those who aren't familiar with remote viewing, we'll just quite simply say that the technique involved in that is that the subconscious mind reaches out across time and space to a target and retrieves information. But equally, the subconscious mind can communicate with another subconscious mind that may not necessarily be human, but is a form of consciousness. And that's how it works. That's exactly how it works, Bob. So
people get trained to do that, don't they?
They do. They certainly do. And I've run courses in it, and it gave answers to questions. And so when you're talking about the subconscious reaching out into time and space and retrieving information, within that time and space are the consciousness of other beings. And that's how you communicate with them. So that's how technically I could communicate with an ET in the ocean somewhere. It'd come back to me across that time and space locality. And that's the bit, Bob, that they keep inquired about. If you look in the US press, there's something called the Advanced Aviation Threat Information Program, AATIP, and in that further all kinds of projects to do with UFOs. to do with the Pentagon's research on UFOs, but none dare call it alien. They're all going on about UAP and UFOs. None dare call it alien, and none dare say what I've just said, because non-locality and all that kind of subconsciousness and conscious communication stuff is classified under ATIP. They put it as classified, Bob.
I would say, because you would have to be careful over there, or it should go missing.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is that element to it. That element to it is a classified element of the UFO phenomena that even the government governments don't really talk about. But it's a cock up. It's a monumental, great big cock up, basically, in my opinion. But that's where I stand with that. You know.
You do right as well. Just be careful what you say.
You've got to be. There's certain areas. I mean, at the moment, what I'm talking about is in the public domain anyway. But there's certain aspects of it that I don't talk about. I can't talk about. Not because I don't want to, but it really is about, safety, your own sanity, and not that, and shocking people. You don't want to be frightening people. Not that there's nothing to be frightened of, but I've seen too much, Bob, to know when it's wise just to not say a lot. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Interesting
I totally
in the
agree.
symbolism in the Indian.
Tony, you were about writing a book.
Yes, I am writing a book, mate. Yeah, it's called A Cosmic Secret, and it's and just tonight I was talking to somebody who I won't tell you her name, but she used to work for MI6, and she had a background in being a psychic. I don't know whether she's been on your show, Bob. You might know who she is. But she has a background in being a remote viewer for the British, not the Americans, but for British intelligence. And it's interesting. Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's something in my book whereby I'm writing from the eyes of a spy who I met, not her, but she knew about that tonight. She actually mentioned it, and she didn't even know about it. And I said, "How did you know?" And she said, "Because I am Jane Bond." Can you believe that? Because I am Jane Bond, she said. I knew. She knew. She knew about that. How the hell she knew, I have no idea, but she knew. And there you go. And, she's still got
psychic as well.
Well, she's psychic, but I mean, she's still got the guard dogs and the cameras, because she was like working for MI6 I think in the 80s at the height of the Cold War. And I think still to this day she still has to look over her back for the old guard of the Cold War, the KGB. It's not gone away. Still not gone away, So I'm told. I mean, I mean, my father, when he was stationed in Vienna, and he told me that he was approached by the KGB in Vienna, Bob. And he was at the time. My father was, I think, he was a corporal. And he was involved in quite a few things. My dad never told me. I mean, my dad was a nasty piece of work, frankly. He was an abusive, disgraceful man. But there were elements, that were fascinating about him, Bob. That was one of the things he told me. That he could heal as well. He had healing hands, Bob. He could heal cats and heal people. He had a talent for healing. Somebody came into our house, Bob, with neuralgia. And he put the hands on them and cured them. It's quite miraculous what he could do.
When he was in the army, did people recognise him and for what he could do?
Me dad? Yeah. No, not really. He kept it very private. I mean, there was some things he did that was quite disturbing, frankly. I mean, for example, he'd never smack me, although he used to. Well, no, he did. He used to beat me up somewhat chronic, mate. But it kind of like, this is interesting. He would give me a headache rather than smack me. Psychically, give me a headache. Right. And at 10, I mean, we were living in squalid housing conditions. We didn't have a bathroom. We had an outside toilet. We had no heating in the house that we were in. And I was only 10. And I was only reflecting the other day as I was writing my book, it actually moved me to tears, that I was walking down the street at 10 years of age to a scrap metal merchant's with a pram. And in that pram was an old kettle, something else and something else and something else, that I was taking to the scrap metal merchants because my mum and dad were broke and could not afford to eat. And it was something like a Wednesday, and they were broke. And I goes to this scrap metal merchants, and the scrap metal guy goes, "You can't come in here. You've got to be 18." Blah blah blah. And his wife very kindly gave me some food to take back to my mum and dad. You know, and this is the kind of, and I mean, I was beaten up for looking dirty, Bob. I mean, I was beaten up for looking unwashed and unclean. They used to call me a gypsy. They used to beat me up. And when you reflect on that and reflect on the extraordinary kind of life, the contrast between that and then dealing with the UFO phenomena, it's been a life like no other. Currently, it's a life like no other. And then you've got all the stuff that went on with my mother, which is as equally shocking. You know, bless her.
Yeah, you've had quite a bad time this last year, really, haven't you?
Yes, mate. Yeah,
and other things.
Yes, I have. We're wandering off narrative. You asked me initially at the beginning. I'm surprised I'm as sharp as I am. But you asked me tonight about how did I get into it. Well, actually, I really got into it with thanks to Nick Pope, of all people. And it was Nick Pope who got me my first. I mean, I'd got my website up and I'd been doing my stuff. Now, I don't know why this happened, but it was Nick Pope who was the guy who got me involved in broadcasting with all this. I have him to thank, and it was Nick who got me a gig with Channel 4, and then I started doing a load of work for Talk Radio, and I'm very lucky to say that years and years down the line, I'm still doing work for Talk Radio. They were Talk Sport back then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and now they've changed to Talk Radio, and I'm still doing work for them all these years ahead, which is great. And I'm now kind of like TV work. I've done all kinds of stuff. And currently now we're getting US television interest, we're getting film interest, and we're really going places with it. But I'm working full time at it now, which is interesting. After all that's gone on, I'm
well, that's really good for you then.
It is, mate. It's going to be long hours. I mean, you're talking. I reckon we'll be putting in about 60 hours a week to get where I want with it all. But before I pop this mortal coil, I want this book written about what went on and what has gone on, because I think it's my public duty to tell the world what I have been through, what I have lived through with all this. I don't know whether listeners can see it, but I've got my collage. Can you see that, Bob, on the screen there? You know, I mean, for example, we've got the submarine element to it. We've got the advanced technology elements of the UFO phenomena there. All of that can be discredited under the banner of it's not what we know, it's what we prove. So the governments and our military know that this goes on, but they prove something entirely different to the public. It's a cover-up, and it's not a good one. And I don't think the cover-up is beneficial either. Although, as we can see in America at the moment, they are trying to make inroads with it. They are trying and get an openness about the UFO phenomenon, but really nobody's telling anything much. Nobody's really clean.
No, they're not telling you everything.
No, they're not.
What's been happening?
No. Somebody like me, Bob, can be smiled and waved at by the New York Times. You know, I approached the New York Times about what had been going on with me, and I got a smile and wave for them, which I will, because they don't want this in the public domain. The last thing they want is some guy who's standing up and saying, "Well, look, I've been targeted, and we've had all this go on, as you can see." But some element does want it, and some element doesn't. You're going to have, you know, one man's information bonanza might be another man's poison in all this, if you get me drift. Because in a way, unwittingly, Bob, this is kind of like, if you were to look at it from the angle of a spy, this is what I'm doing is intelligence product. It's just product like no other, pushed out there, due to the liaison with the people behind the mysterious objects, you know. So you've always got this spy, cloak and dagger element to the UFO phenomena. And I mean, I've been followed and stalked and put under surveillance. Oh my God, Bob, you
I know you have.
Well,
I know we've talked about this in the past, and it's not. Well, you can't go anywhere without being followed.
It kind of like it's very strange, but when it was happening, when it really was going on back in the 90s, I was being followed, and there was unmarked helicopters as well filming me, and it was really, I suppose, it's because of the UFO that illuminated a TV antenna in the early days. I mean, this UFO came in. It began in 1999. It came in over the house, illuminated a TV antenna, and flew off again. Quite intentionally, and it ain't. And I learned that it ain't from another planet, although it is from another planet. It's actually from another universe, but they're using our oceans as bases. So if you're looking at the media at the moment, the one agency that you might want to just carefully watch what they're saying about all this is the U.S. Navy. the navies and the land armies, surprisingly as well, Bob. The armies of our so there was this famous thing by Colonel Philip Corso when he wrote the book The Day After Roswell, and he indicated that you couldn't tell the intelligence services anything about the UFO phenomena because it would go back to the Russians, and that's very true. You just don't know where that information is going. So the ethos was to keep it contained within the land army, within the U.S. Army. And the armies of our world, the British Army, the US Army, for example, have a saga of dealing with the UFO phenomena that is kind of like underrated. They've had to recover the UFOs. They've had to they've had to understand it, and it's all very clandestine and secret what's going on there. And it all stems, I think, the UFO cover-up as we see it today, all stems from Germany and Operation Paperclip and the Roswell crash and liaison with dodgy aliens. And it's, as Eisenhower said, he came out with that military-industrial complex speech, and he said that citizens must be vigilant as to what's gone on. And really, that's it, Bob. It must be, you've got to be vigilant as to what has gone on. And so I feel that this is like a public duty that I'm doing to try and get the information out there about who are these people behind these objects, what are they doing, what are they all about,
Exactly. Who are they and why to keep doing this?
Yes, that's right, mate. And there is definitely an information war, and there is definitely a Cold War going on between these two alien groups. And I would describe it as quite simply like the Cold War of Russia, NATO. It's a similar thing. In alien times, it's a similar thing, Cold War, going on behind the scenes. My mother, Bob, I mean, for example, the contrast is amazing. My mother started getting symptoms of dementia. In fact, it was worse than that. She became incontinent, and I looked after her for 3 years. I couldn't get help. I was looking after her for 3 years with this condition, and for a son to do that with his mother is quite heartbreaking. It got to a stage, Bob, where it became heartbreaking, actually. So we managed, after it took us 3 years to get help. But within that period, as I said on the Jimmy Church show the other evening, you've kind of like got this scenario going on of being targeted while at the same time trying to look after her. And I know that during my course of interaction with the UFO phenomena, they revealed themselves in about 2014 as being blonde, blue-eyed people behind the UFO phenomena. And that was like a doomsday type warning that they were signaling to somebody. You see, they're using the realm of subconsciousness and non-locality, Bob, and that's where their operations are. And it was as if they were signaling to a third party. So I get the distinct impression that some agency on Earth somewhere has a liaison with them. I'm just getting that impression that somebody somewhere is speaking to them, even as kind of like now, but it's kept ultra secret. I think the UFO phenomena, listeners may not realise, is more classified than the nuclear bomb program. More classified than nuclear, the UFO phenomena. And there's that.
Why is it?
Say that again, Bob.
Why is it so classified?
It's classified because of what left Nazi Germany and went into America's scientific base under Operation Paperclip. And it's also classified because of the strategic advantage that a government may have with liaison with them, a technological and strategic advantage. And actually, the truth of the matter is, Bob, I won't go any further with that. But we'll just say that that's basically the apparatus behind the cover-up. And then you've got the narrative running in the press at the moment, for example, in the American press. You've got this narrative running of UFOs are a threat. UFOs are this, UFOs are that. UFOs are not that is a very sweeping remark to say that UFOs are a threat. And they're using it very, I think it was Werner von Braun, the Nazi scientist, I may have got his name wrong, speaking to Carol Roslin, who indicated that there was plans in place for this to be a UFO threat, to be marketed as such as a threat, when it's far from a threat. It's kind of like quite comical to see this narrative being played out when you're a covert witness and you are shown entirely the opposite of what the media are saying. You're shown the entire opposite.
I totally agree with everything you're saying there as well.
Yeah.
They're not a threat.
Yeah. No. This is now on saying that they're not a threat. It's tricky. It's a matter of the fact that even though they're not a threat, You can't go around this universe with your eyes closed. You can't live in a fantasy world. That these UFOs have got offensive, defensive systems, and they have military command structure. They do. That these ETs have got all that in place because it's an uncertain universe. But what you have definitely got going on is a Cold War. And I think what the other bit about the fact the alien invasion, that's the one, Bob, that really is comical. The alien invasion narrative is hilarious because some of these ET groups have judiciary. They have legal process like we do. And to have an invasion, that's not happening. We're not being invaded by them. They're far too smart for that. The cock-up happened with it all under Eisenhower and the shadow government under Nixon. And that's really where the cover-up began. And that was to do with buying a UFO from people who you don't know. That's the thing. One carefully used owner, you can have our UFO, away you go. And that's probably where it all went wrong, Bob. And from that, this whole kind of narrative of they're invading us, they're threatening us, at the end of the day, they're not. The constant modus operandi from these UFOs with me has been illuminating radio antennas. They've done this continually. They've been illuminating radio antennas. They have purposely near-missed military aircraft. That's happened with me on numerous occasions when I've observed these UFOs. They've done that quite intentionally. Not threatening them, saying hello to them. So what you've got is this scenario of, let's say, the United Kingdom and its military being waved at by advanced cultures, being waved at. I think that's what's going on. There's one incident where, Bob, there's one incident where one of these UFOs, before my mother really became ill, bless her, one of these UFOs came in over my ham radio antenna and flew straight through it, Bob. It came in over the garden, it changed its shape, flew through the radio antenna and out the other side of it again. Quite intentional. It went for the radio antenna. There was another incident, as I say, with the UFO where it came in and illuminated a TV antenna. There was another incident where one of these UAVs came over my house, and this UFO came in at tremendous speed from nowhere. Jason, how the hell he caught it, I've no idea, but he saw it. Came in over the house at speed, and it got buzzed. And this unmanned aerial vehicle was definitely overtaken by a UFO at speed, quite intentional. So, but the question is, what's the ultimate game of it? I don't know, Bob. Do you get me? I just
exactly why?
Why?
It's just a game, then, isn't it?
Yeah, it's no game. It's so much as there's something going on. There is something going on, and maybe part of it is beyond me, and maybe whatever is going on. I mean, my God, there's a maritime element to all this, Bob. I mean, that with this UFO phenomena, it's like the film The Abyss. Have you seen The Abyss? I'm sure your listeners have.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Well, it's more like The Abyss than you would ever know. These UFOs are routinely using our oceans, and certain people are talking to them. In our society, in public, I'm one of them. You kind of like you're having a conversation with them, and that conversation can occur any time, night or day with them. And it's quite, how can I put it, not scary, but you kind of like, you get used to it. You get very used to it. And I know that in about 2014, when they first revealed themselves, it was like this spectacular vision of these clocks, Bob. One said 4:45. I've got it on my website. One said 5 to midnight, true triangle craft. And this spectacular vision of this Nordic man, blonde, blue-eyed, unbelievable, quite a dude, speaking to somebody as if the volume was off. But he was speaking to someone. But it wasn't me. It wasn't for my ears. I don't know who the hell he was talking to, but it was clearly him. The standing joke being that he's quite the ladies' man. All the ladies would swoon if they saw him because he's quite a spectacular-looking fella. But he was, that joke aside, he was definitely communicating with somebody. And that communication seems to go on. And Bob, we had this bizarre incident about a year later, 2 years later, of the biggest air exercise over my town. I mean, my town's a small town in Yorkshire. And we had a major air exercise go on, the like of which, including the Luftwaffe. I mean, the Luftwaffe turned up, the German Air Force. A few other, there was typhoons coming over the place. Hercules C-130 circled my house several times with the pilot waving at me. And when
Yeah,
Jason,
it's so strange when you're talking about that, Tony.
oh,
And all these are coming over your house.
well, you see that they might be there again, Bob. They might be just having a simple air exercise. No worries about that. It might be all perfectly normal. But to me, it happened last week with it as well. They had a major exercise over the town again last week. And this time they had ospreys and all sorts going on. You know, the big aircraft that can lift its propellers upwards so it becomes a helicopter. They're big craft. They had them flying round, Hercules, Typhoid, all going off round in my area again. Now I've moved to Southport and I've had my share of seeing these UFOs, you know. So, you know, that triggered an air exercise. So I have reason to suspect that there is something going on. And I know that, you know, I gave a talk, I think it's been over a year, Bob, but you wouldn't know about the strange, mysterious phone call that I had, would you? Since we last talked. You wouldn't have known, would you? My God. No, you wouldn't. Well, you know, I gave a talk in Watford, and the 3 days later, this was when my mum was well, or I was looking after her, and she wasn't really all that ill at the time, bless her. Well, she was actually, bless her, but we were, you know, they were rewarding years with her, Bob, caring for her. They were rewarding years. I look back on them fondly. They were some of the best years of my life spent with her while I was looking after her. It was nice. There were good times, even though she had this horrendous condition. You know, she was an incredible woman. And I remember, gracious, I'm getting emotional, sorry. Where am I, Bob? Where am I? I'm talking away. Direct me. What am I talking about?
Yeah,
mate?
you were talking about the phone calls and.
Yeah, the phone calls. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but yeah. So, you know, so I'm at Watford and does this talk, and about 3 days later, the phone rings. There's a guy on the end of the phone claiming to be from German intelligence. Now, I keep an open mind about all this, Bob. Was it a crank or was it the real deal? I don't know. Claims to represent the security of the Constitution and Germany's defences. But he said he was specifically protection of the Constitution, which is a legitimate German department. He started questioning about these UFOs and their artificial intelligence elements to them. Because some of these craft, Bob, these UFOs, you know, they're artificially intelligent. They've got a mind of their own because you're dealing with ETs that are about 700 to 800 years ahead of us. So you've got this kind of situation where these UFOs are intelligent. They're not just the occupants of them refer to these UFOs as their beloved ship, you know. And during my many years of interaction with UFOs, what was fascinating about this AI UFO element, the Nordics, they're like triangle UFOs and they're intelligent. And and during my interaction, we'll cut a long story short, when I was liaising with this craft, what I found fascinating in many years of interaction with them was that this craft wanted to know the universe, Bob. It wanted to understand the universe, spirituality like we did. And it couldn't because it was a machine. And that was the incredible thing. It couldn't because it was a machine. And that was the absolutely incredible thing about it. And I have often wondered about that incident as to what was going on. You know, it really was something else. Really was something else.
But that is, yeah, exactly what you're saying there. It's just amazing the things what have happened to you all them years.
Oh, well, I know, I know, mate. And you see, that the thing is with it is that this UFO in particular, when the incident happened, which was, I don't know why it happened, but it did. It kind of like the craft, I was in it, and it had its own machine intelligence. It could speak like a machine. I can't even put it into words. Not a human, but a machine with its own mind. And it was very polite, and it was very nice, but it seemed to want to know. It was frustrated that it could not understand the cosmos as a spiritual function because it was a machine. It was like a Dalek that couldn't go up the stairs. Advanced machine, you know, could travel across space and time, could do its, but could not understand spirituality like we could. It was thirsting, it was questing for it. It was a fascinating interaction, Bob, in all the interactions I've had. And as I say, the crew referred to it as their beloved ship. It was as if it had a mind of its own, you know.
Mm. You know, how long we got? About 15 minutes. How do you see the future for mankind then, down here on Earth?
Yeah, okay. That's a very interesting one, Bob. How do I see mankind is currently being warned that they're dealing with some hybrid threats. Hybrid threats are not aliens invading us. Quite the opposite, actually. They're not invading us. They're not a threat. But my argument is, when is a threat a warning? So, for example, these aliens are warning. For example, they could be warning the British government. The thing with these ETs is that their technology base is a bit more advanced than us. They're by about 900 to 700 years. And their capabilities are they are able to control the environment, and we are not. Yeah. And so, in terms of the future of mankind, the environment and nature is a hybrid threat. Nature, the sea levels, is a hybrid threat to the United Kingdom. It's an issue. So this is the thing that they're hinting about, and therefore we have got to get our act together in terms of the environment, most definitely. And there's also the theme. There's a biblical theme running through this. With the battle of light and dark within the biblical terms is correct, Bob. Absolutely correct. And you've got a situation going on where mankind has had conflicts, and the nuclear issue is a very real threat. There are some researchers out there, one in particular, who says that these aliens, it's a new age platitude. In other words, it stems from the 1970s. Hey, dudes, the aliens are here. Ain't that cool? They all said we got to be nice to each other. Ain't that cool? It's a real hippie thing. Oh, no, it isn't. It's not a hippie thing. These people in the UFOs are very smart. Their technology is nearly 700 to 800 years ahead. They know how to control environments, and they are concerned. The warning is about nuclear. The warning is nuclear. It's definitely nuclear. And the warning is to all mankind and governments to be cautious with nuclear. Nuclear weapons are the most disgusting weapons that have ever been created. And I learned over the years in dealing with the UFO phenomenon, Bob, that these maritime UFOs, the UFOs from under the seas, routinely watch submarines, routinely watch our nuclear situation all the time. You know, there was a famous story, Air Chief Marshal Horsley, had a mysterious meeting with somebody called Janice. And what was hilarious is George Galloway, when I did this interview with George Galloway about that, he said, oh, was Janice his cleaner? Well, no, Janice wasn't his cleaner, and that was the standing joke. It was Janice, spelled Janis, and he was summoned, was Peter Horsley, the Air Chief Marshal, to a mysterious meeting with a man in Kensington who did not look human, according to him. This man knew all about Britain's nuclear weapons program, and he wasn't military. And Peter Horsley, the story is that there's an indication that the bloke was extraterrestrial, and he knew about it. So all governments of our world are being warned about war, are being warned about the nuclear issues that we face, or we face an uncertain future. And I think when it came to the situation with Colonel Philip Corso, when he wrote the book The Day After Roswell, he had interactions with ETs, and they indicated to him that it would be a nice future for mankind if we could get our act together. But at the moment, you know, Bob, I've seen too much about all this. I've seen a lot of violence in my life. I've seen things that I really have seen some stuff, and that we're not dealing with all this. And, you know, this is a very real thing to do with peace on Earth. It's a very important issue. If we don't have that, the future of mankind is going to be a warlike one, and that's what we don't want. That.
We don't want it to wait, do we?
No, we don't. And because these UFOs, these ETs, communicate in non-locality and in the realm of the subconscious, you could quite easily have our Prime Minister speak to them as equally as you could have the President speaking to them, and they wouldn't make that public. But they could. They could certainly speak to them quite easily about, you know, this, that, and the other. And they're there. And I think that it's to do with the fact, I think that Donald Trump doesn't want the children of his nations running to nuclear shelters, as equally as President Putin certainly doesn't want the children of Moscow running to nuclear shelters. It's insanity, and we need to realise that we have to be one world, Bob. We really do. We have to be one world with all this in terms of
you know, when we talk about that, who rules the world now? Is it a secret government?
There is a secret government. There is a shadow government. Yes. Does it rule the world? Not quite. No. The world is ruled from a biblical angle, actually. The Bible talks of Satan and the battle against dark and light. Human affairs are controlled at a certain level. There is an interesting take on that from a contact experiencer called Alec Newald, who was abducted by aliens in Auckland. His book is called Coevolution, and he was driving down the street to Auckland. He went missing for 10 days, Bob. He says he was put back. He doesn't know how the hell it happened. His book is called Coevolution. And he said that when it looked as if ghosts were walking towards him, and he thought he died in a car crash. Because he said he had these ghostly figures walking towards him, and they weren't ghosts, they were aliens. And what these ETs were saying was that they were on a reverse dimension to us, and not only that, it was kind of like they were on the reverse cycle of, I think, to get this right, matter pulses at a certain frequency, so solid objects are in fact atomic in nature, and they were actually on the reverse wave cycle of all that. They were our dimensional neighbours, and they turned around to him and said that the Earth was ruled by a dark force that had to be treated with respect because it was a form of life. And that's where it's at. So mankind has got these hybrid threats, one of which is the environment around us. The seas are a hybrid threat. Our oceans could possibly be a hybrid threat. And we've got to understand the environment, mate. But instead, we've got AATIP in the media. We've got Luis Elizondo, seems a very good bloke, standing there telling us about the 32 sub-projects of AATIP. And there's thrust vectoring, defensive mechanisms, destruction, weapons, this, that, and the. Oh my God, it never ends, Bob. Violence, just
it never ends, does it?
Yeah. No, it never ends. And the situation as well is the fact that that's where it can get very complex when you're dealing with behind the scenes stuff to do with agencies like the Collins Elite. The Collins Elite were an agency set up that believed. There were elements of the US Army and Navy and FBI. They formed this agency called the Collins Elite, who believed that UFOs had a demonic element to them, a demonic component to them. And that would be correct, actually. There is something like that going on, but it's not entirely UFO and alien. It's more biblical, really. And you see, when Luis Elizondo, the man behind AATIP, revealing all this, he stood up and said in one of his slides at MUFON that there were ethical and moral considerations from his department, the Department of Defense, as to why this information should not be disclosed. Well, it should be disclosed to re-navigate the path of mankind for a better future. It should be disclosed to improve our environmental factors, and it should be disclosed to counter the various hybrid threats that are going on at the moment that mankind doesn't quite even know about. And they're not necessarily aliens. And that's the thing with it, Bob. So we gotta manoeuvre around this very carefully for us to have a better future.
Of course you do.
You get what I'm saying?
Tony, I know we haven't got long left. What's your plans for your future?
Well, at the moment, mate, I'll tell you what my plans are. My plans for the future are something like this. I want to get my book written. I want to get a major film done about my life. And then once I've got the book written and done that, I want to walk away from it all. I'll retire from this. I think I'll walk away. I've seen enough. I've done enough. I may be Bob, a one-man intelligence agency about all this. I may as well be my own Majestic 12. But I've seen enough. I've done enough. I'll probably, once I've got those items done, the book, the film, bit more broadcasting work, I'll probably walk away. I'd like to adopt a family. That'd be nice. I'd like to do something like that. I've seen things, Bob, that would deeply shock people, deeply shock the hardest of military men. I've seen things in all this paranormal warfare, the UFO phenomena. I've just seen too much, and I'm tired. And of course,
I'm going to say you do as well, because people just don't realise what things get involved with. And
No, they don't, mate. No, and they don't realise some of the stuff that you can't talk about because you become like, not that you're being secretive, you're being safe, because you become a one-man intelligence agency and you start having to classify your own information. You start having to say, sorry, I can't talk about that. I've got to word this a certain way. I've got to do. Honestly, you're like a one-man agency. And that's very interesting. You know, it is. But I've got to say that my dear mother, we went through the gates of hell with a dementia that developed into Alzheimer's, and she died in tragic circumstances in the hospital. Bless her heart. I think she'd be very proud of me, though, on what I'm achieving now. The broadcasting stuff really is taking off. The book's getting written. I'm very proud of myself, considering that I'd lost my mother. I'd lost the house that we lived in. I had to move. I had to have major hernia surgery. Any other man, I think, of the wrong caliber.
And then you had to start all over again, didn't you?
Yes, that's right, mate. And any other man who wasn't made of the right stuff would be in a psychiatric unit. I would probably come close, Bob, very close, and I have done actually, to cracking up with all this because of the pressure, the stress of it all, the hidden stress of it all, what people don't see. Here I am talking on your radio program, but behind the scenes, my word, you know, UFOs. I mean, for example, they're going to come in again. They tell me that these UFOs, that they're coming in again. I'm going to film them again. I know where they're turning up. I've had visions of where they're turning up. I just don't know when. And so we'll get the camera ready and get them filmed. And hopefully the camera will not tell a lie, you know?
Because people, when you know, all these years, and still today, if you start talking about it, they think you're crackers.
Well, yes and no on that one. They will think you're crackers. You see, if you've got a policy of not lying and not embellishing and telling it like it is, people pick it up. People subliminally hear the truth. And therefore, if you're lying about it, they'll equally subliminally hear that. Do you get me?
Yes,
so kind of like if you stand your ground in truth, you can't go far wrong. But I have a policy of anybody who gives me nonsense and debunkery and all that kind of stuff. I have quite a ruthless policy of I'm cutthroat. Anybody comes my way and says this has not happened, you debunk, you this, that. You couldn't make this up, Bob. I mean, unless I'm a creative genius, one of the best in the world, what I've just said to you, you could not make that up as a liar.
No.
It's too incredibly complex. It's too intricate. And my story has not changed for over 20 years. It's still the same story. And another 5 years down the line, the story still will not change. There'll be more bits added on. You know?
Yeah, of course there will.
Of course. That's the thing. That's what I feel.
So when is your book going to come out then? Is it going to be?
Well, we're on a gear up for getting that out for Christmas. I'm on a gear up to get that out in December, if not before. There's a lot to do on it. There's some very controversial chapters in it, including the bit where they're using mind-invasive technology on me. And the question, therefore, would then be, could you get a D notice slapped on me? I might be one of the first UFO researchers that gets a D notice slapped on him, get denoticed. I don't think that would happen. I'm very lucky with the media here in the UK. I'm very lucky in that sense. But, you know, Bob, it's going to be quite a read. It's going to be quite a shocker.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about, isn't it? Getting it out there.
Well, exactly. I mean,
what's happened.
Yeah, it's not called Great Britain for nothing. Great Britain is an incredible country. It's such a great country that even the UFOs turn up here to speak to everyone. That's how much of a nice country it is. And despite its problems, despite its limitations, and despite the disagreements with governance and all that kind of thing, there must be something going on with Great Britain to have all this UFO activity going on over it, Bob. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I certainly do as well. We just about run out of time, unfortunately.
Right, mate.
But when you do get your book out,
yes,
we will have to have you back on the show.
Of course, mate. Well, it should be written. I mean, all this month it's going to be written. So starting on Monday, the work starts. Literally on Monday, the work. I mean, at the moment, the first chapter has been written, and it's to do with me meeting a master spy. And the story begins from there. So there's a bit of an espionage element to it. It's to do with the narrative of it all and events, and it's going to be quite a read, Bob. Quite a read by the time I've finished. And hopefully
we'll be proud of you.
Yeah, I think she would, pal. I think she would, and that's what I want to do. I'm not concerned about my father. He was a swine. You know, anything I do is not driven by him, but I like to think that my mother, if she could see all this, she'd become very proud of me. She was
Oh,
very proud of me when I looked after her, Bob, like I did, because she said no other son would do that like I did, and I did. I went the full Monty with her. You know, so there we go, mate. That's it.
that's good for you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show at short notice.
No, you're all right, mate.
You're a genuine guy, and you know we love you to bits. I'm glad you're getting your book out, and I'm sure it'll be a fantastic read.
Oh, it will be by the time I finish, mate. Oh, my word, it will be. By the time I finished, it'll be an unput-downable book, that is for sure. Most definitely, I'll make sure of that.
Oh, lovely. And thank you for Jenny for being the producer of the show today. My guest next Wednesday is Laura Ketchledge. Laura Ketchledge. We're going to talk about the paranormal. We're going to talk about all different sorts of things on the show next Wednesday, and UFOs as well.
Good.
That's I'll just get the date right. Next Wednesday will be the 9th of October at 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, and 8 p.m. in the UK. Thank you to everybody else, and everyone have a lovely weekend. Bye for now.